Gasoline electric hybrid. What does it all mean? We'll give you some insight this week on Motoring 2001.
TSN's Motoring 2001 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.
You know, we all like to talk about the environment and how we should protect it and not pollute. Well, talk can be cheap. I mean, look at all the sport utilities on the highways today. They continue to get bigger and thirstier. And you know, it's too bad because there are plenty of options out there. How about the new hybrid vehicles? The Toyota Prius, for one. Here's a vehicle that can run both on gasoline and electric. And how about the Honda Insight? It has to be the cutest econobox out there. Well, over the next few months, we're going to experience life with the Insight in our long-term fleet and maybe clear up some misconceptions. But first, we're going to see how one car manufacturer is continuing to build on its heritage and taking a fresh approach in producing what could be the world's safest vehicle.
Safety for Volvo is one of the cornerstones in our brand name, and we certainly have the ambition to stay number one in the world when it comes to automotive safety. The safety concept car shows the seriousness about this attempt.
Just in case anybody was doubting that we were the leading exponent of safety, we just come up with this to show, yes, we are. This time, though, passive safety, which has been our forte, this time we're going to the active safety side much more.
The safety concepts you see in this car, they focus on active safety, okay? And that's the part of safety that helps you avoid an accident. We wanted safe cars that look great. We want to excite people about safety, because really to have fun in a car, it's a little bit like being on a trapeze. You can go up and swing around and have more fun if you know there's a net below. In a car, if you know that the car is competent and it can handle anything you throw at it, you can have more fun with it.
The essence of this is good vision. The driver must see as much as he can. And the fixed eye point, which is the basis of this car, means that all the drivers, whenever a driver sits in, no matter how tall or short the driver is, the car will detect where the eyes are through an infrared beam, and a camera can recognize the reflections in somebody's eyeball. It will move the seat so that the eyes are in the optimum position to see out of the car. There's no forward and rearward movement of the seat. Everything else moves. The pedals, the steering wheel, and the center console come towards the driver for optimum use and optimum vision, optimum controllability. And it meant that once we had established that everybody would sit in the same place, then we could make the A-pillars transparent almost. We've made a structure that you can see through. It maintains all the strength necessary in the front pillars, but it's more or less an extension of the windscreen now, so it's all-round vision. And if you look at the way the B-pillar is moved into the car, it means if you turn your head to the side, you're not confronted with a very big B-pillar with a seatbelt coming out of it. It's glass. So the vision is the thing in this car. It's the active safety.
We have some automated systems, like a blind spot warning system, that if you try to change lanes and there's someone in your blind spot, you get warning indicators in the form of a light on the mirror. You get an audible warning from the side of the car that you should not drive toward. Sounds like a rumble strip. If you are if you're converging on a car in front of you too quickly, or they're either braking or you're accelerating too quickly, you'll get a collision warning forward that is in the form of a heads-up display of red lights that appear in your windscreen, suggesting that now's the time to put the brakes on. You know, wake up, slow down, and control your car.
When you pull up to a junction, the headlamp beam gets wider and shorter, a broader beam, so you can see everything at the junction. As you set off and accelerate, the beam gets narrower and longer, so you can see down the road. And when it comes to a corner, the headlamp beam will turn the corner with you, so you can see what's coming around the corner. A lot of ideas, but again, on the active side, as much as the passive. We still have all the passive Volvo airbags and restraint systems, a new restraint system, in fact, the 4-point safety belt. So this is real safety in action as well as active safety.
That's the goal, just to help and avoid any potential for accidents.
If there's one thing I know, it's cars. Take it from me, this is a great car. I've been driving 19 years, and I've had 12 of these. Why, as soon as this one's paid for, I'm going to get another one. Just in time for the 72s. Yes, sir, I'm hooked. I wouldn't drive anything else. Look at that color, peacock blue.
If the logic of this argument escapes you, you're ready for a Volvo. Volvos are built so well, they last an average of 11 years in Sweden. How long they'll last here is anybody's guess.
If it wasn't a great car, why would I buy so many of them?
In the new car retailing business, can the customer always be right, even when he's wrong? That's coming up later on Kenzie's Corner.
Two of the more lucrative segments in Canada are the minivan and sport utility categories, at least from a manufacturer's perspective. Now, while Hyundai bailed on bringing a minivan to North America, they certainly didn't with the sport utility vehicle. This week on Test Drive, we take a look at the all-new Hyundai Santa Fe. Santa Fe's power comes from a lively 2.7-litre V6 that develops 181 horsepower and 177 pounds-feet of torque at 4,000 RPM. Off the line it pulls strongly and delivers ample passing power in the mid-range. It's also smooth and quiet under most circumstances. However, at wide open throttle it brings an angry sound that permeates the interior. The latter actually dissuades you from venturing up the rev range unless absolutely necessary. Scrambling up a steep hill like this is an interesting challenge for the Santa Fe, primarily because there's no low-range transfer case. That means that in the highway gear you're pushing against the edge of the power envelope all the way up. The other thing you've got to be careful of, there's nothing protecting the gas tank, drive shaft or exhaust system, so you run the risk of damage if you high center the vehicle. On a more positive note, the all-wheel drive system is very good. It uses a center viscous coupling to send 40% of the power to the rear wheels and 60% to the front. That gives you a very balanced dynamic. If either set of wheels start to slip, then the viscous coupling does its stuff and keeps you going. Reservations aside, the Santa Fe is as good in the dirt as most will ever expect it to be. The McPherson strut front and multi-link rear suspensions bring a decent amount of travel that soak up the rough stuff. On road, the ride is smooth and body roll, given the tall stance, well controlled by a pair of anti-roll bars. Even when driven with enthusiasm, the Santa Fe goes where it's pointed and with a surprising degree of accuracy. Much of this is down to a nicely weighted rack and pinion steering system and large 225/70 R16 tyres. This plastic piece by the battery is where the air comes in. This is the air cleaner and the ductwork that takes everything into the engine. Now, what's the problem? To get from here to here, it goes all the way down underneath the front frame rail and back up into the bottom of the airbox. The problem is, there's only this flimsy plastic covering to stop the water from getting into the system. Now, if you happen to be off-road and you run through a puddle that's more than about a foot deep, you run the risk of sucking water into the engine. And if you do that, you can kiss the engine goodbye. Stopping power comes from a four-wheel disc design with anti-lock, at least if you take the up-level GLS model tested. The pedal is easily modulated and the ABS willing to stay out until needed. During the test, we recorded an average distance of 116 feet from 80k.
Inside, the Santa Fe has got some very thoughtful features. For instance, the passenger seat has got an occupant detection system. If there's nobody sitting here, or heaven forbid a small child, the airbag won't deploy, which is going to save a lot of money when it comes time to repair. Secondly, you get a manumatic transmission. Now this thing gives you some availability of engine braking if you do go off-road. Elsewhere, the vehicle comes loaded. Power locks, windows, mirrors, cruise control, air conditioning, and a decent sounding radio. But therein lies the rub. The buttons for all of those power items and the climate controls and even the sundry switches at the top are enormous. When you get to the radio, the buttons are about the size of the end of a blunt pencil. Do yourself a favour. It's a joke, and so trade up when you purchase the vehicle.
In a segment that sees too many offerings looking so much alike because of the basic two-box design, the Santa Fe is a refreshing departure. The bold sweeping lines wrap neatly around a package that brings plenty of interior space. The rear seat is roomy and the split folding seats add to the versatility. With the seats up, there's a generous 30 cubic feet of cargo capacity. Folding both halves down brings a fairly flat floor and 78 cubic feet of squared off space. On the safety front, the Santa Fe brings dual front airbags and 3-point seat belts in all seating positions, with the fronts getting pre-tensioners.
As an urban assault vehicle, this new Hyundai is a very nice piece. The all-wheel drive system adds on-road security, it's got plenty of power, and the interior amenities abound. The problem is, when you get out into the wilderness like we are right now, the routing of that air intake duct and the lack of a low-range transfer case severely limit where you'd want to take this vehicle. And that's a shame.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns engine coolant, one of the most basic checks you can make on your cooling system, and one that most motorists can handle easily themselves, is checking the level and condition of the engine coolant. Remember, the coolant is the medium that cools your engine. No matter how good the radiator, hoses, water pump, or belts are, if you don't have sufficient coolant in good condition in that cooling system, you won't get proper engine cooling. Now, where a lot of people make their mistake is they assume that because they haven't seen puddles or dripping underneath their car, that their cooling system must still be full. Remember that a hot engine can cause a minor coolant leak to vaporize, turn into steam, and disappear. You won't necessarily see any puddles on the ground, and after that slow leak goes on for a long period of time, you're dangerously low on coolant. So take charge of checking that engine coolant level on a regular basis and top it up yourself. Remember to mix the coolant 50-50 with water. That's what most manufacturers recommend, and only add coolant with the engine cold or cool so there's no pressure in that cooling system. Understand where you add it. Your owner's manual again will help you out, and keep it topped up on a regular basis. That's your Midas tip of the week.
It's really time now for Dodge to crash the party again.
The existing Dodge Ram is aging. Since the current Ram came out in, what was it, 94, that put everybody on their ear with such a radical new design. But that's exactly what they needed, because everybody had given up on the Dodge pickup because it was just aging so much, it was so old that nobody was buying it. Certainly nobody was buying it who actually had to drive it. There were some commercial uses for it, and it was a cheap truck. But it was very, very old, and so they had to do something completely different.
The new 1994 Dodge Ram pickup.
They did so with the Dodge Ram for 1994, and now they are it's almost as if history is repeating itself. they're in a similar position in that the other major players, the domestics, both Chevy and Ford, have redesigned their pickup trucks, both light duty and heavier duty versions, and are very, very competitive in the marketplace. So now Dodge is, in spite of the fact it's looking fresh, it's one of the older designs on the marketplace. So now they're having to come out with something that is fresh and new, and they have in fact done that.
Who would have thought 14 years ago they'd be building cars like this Honda Insight? Well, you know, that's how long we have been on the air on TSN. In fact, we get email and letters from people who weren't even born when we first started out. And you know, every now and then we like to look back at the way it was. So before we head to the Quaker State Garage 2001 version, let's head back and check out the young Bill Gardiner.
Well, for the driver, here's where the brake system starts, right at the pedal. Now, a lot of potential problems with the brake system are going to feed back some information back through that pedal. You're going to get a feel for what's happening in the car. Here we've got a couple of disc brake pads, a brand new one, full lining thickness here, and a worn out brake pad. You can see that the rivets are very close to contacting the rotor. Okay, with the brand new full thickness disc brake pad, you can see that there's a nice gap between the sensor and the rotor. I just can't believe how many cars come in nowadays down significant quantities of oil, 2 and 3 liters low on a car that only holds 4 or 5 liters of oil. It's really important to have the correct amount of crankcase oil in there. The light on your dash will not indicate how low the oil level is. It only tells you oil pressure. All these things we've looked at are preventive maintenance. We're trying to catch problems before they develop into costly repairs. I'm Bill Gardiner for Motoring 88. Brad, look at what I found in my hockey bag. That t-shirt you gave me for that first shoot. And that was the first shoot I did with you back in '88. I think this shirt's been in the bag since then, and I don't like to wash my clothes too often because washing them wears them out. And I'm pretty glad that I'm upwind from this thing right now. Anyhow, what I want to talk about this week is the stabilizer link kit, this little component that's in the front end of your car. When it's broken or worn out, it can cause you all kinds of grief and lots of noise. Here's the stabilizer link kit that's causing us all the noise on our Pontiac Sunbird. Now at the top end of the stabilizer link, we can see that it's solidly attached. There's a rubber grommet here and right here. They're still intact, and the washers on either side are there. And when I grab the stabilizer link, it's still solidly attached to the stabilizer bar right here. But if I start to jack the car up and you watch at the bottom end, there should be a second set of rubber grommets and 2 more washers attaching the bottom end of our link to the lower control arm. It's broken down there and they're completely missing. They've dropped off on the road somewhere. And when you pull the car in over a pavement seam, in other words, pulling into a driveway or a parking lot, and especially if you put the tires over on a diagonal, in other words, the right front or left front tire hit the seam before the other front tire, you're going to hear one heck of a clanking and banging sound as the stabilizer link kit makes metallic contact with the lower control arm. Now in this car and many others like it, when the stabilizer link breaks, it just happens to be very close to the outer CV boot and it can easily cut the boot. So there's one reason why you don't want to let something like this go. But more importantly, as the name implies, the stabilizer bar lends stability to the front end. So there's a bit of a safety issue. When it's broken like this and you take an on or an off ramp off the highway or any sweeping high-speed turn for that matter, you're going to notice an awful lot of body roll or body lean as you take that turn if these stabilizers are broken or deteriorated. If you replace them, the car will corner in a much more flatter fashion, much more stability to it, and a lot more road holding ability. So it's important to have a look at these things on a regular basis. And remember the symptom, when you go over a pavement seam with diagonal corners of the car hitting first, you're likely to hear a banging sound if they're broken. They should be periodically inspected. Now, one thing about these things is they're probably the least expensive part in the front end of your car that can wear out or break. $20.15 for a brand new one from GM. You should replace both sides if one's broken. And remember, there's not a lot of labor involved, so this is probably the least expensive repair you're likely to ever do on the front end of your car. And by the way, this one, the new one, has urethane bushings. The old one had rubber bushings. The urethane is less compressible, so the cornering will be even better on this car. If they're slightly compressible, that's a little bit of body lean. The high-performance car guys like to replace with these urethane ones. They get much more cornering ability and much better road holding ability on their high-performance cars. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardiner for Motoring 2001.
There's no question there's a lot of changes going on in the automobile retailing business. The internet, companies like Auto Bytel and brokers are challenging the traditional franchise dealer's right to dominate this particular market. And one of the things that seems to be bugging the internet guys particularly is that they can't have access to the dealer cost of the cars like they can in the States. You got front page newspaper articles and magazines and TV commentators whining about this fact that the consumers don't have this advantage. Well, I started to think, what other business would you expect to have the dealer cost? I mean, let's say you went in to buy a suit, for example. Like I'd know a lot about that. But I mean, would you expect the tailor to tell you exactly how much it cost him to make that suit? No, you'd try it on. If it looked good and the fabric was nice and the material was good and the price was right, well, you just pay the price and go home. And another thing, would you haggle over that suit? Well, maybe some of you would, but for the most part, we just pay it. I mean, if you go to buy a microwave and it's $249.95, you flash the Visa card, end of story. Now, some people say they don't want to haggle over the price of cars. Well, some dealers tried that, windshield sticker pricing. And then the customers complained, I don't want to pay the same price as everybody else, I want a better deal. Well, who's at fault here? I mean, if the dealers sold more cars that way, trust me, they'd all do it that way. And another thing, you somehow expect a car dealer to sell you a $30,000 product and make a $200 profit. I don't know what kind of business you're in, but if you're working on that kind of margin, you're not going to be in business for very long. Now, the franchise dealer network system, that's been in business for almost 100 years. I'm willing to bet that despite all the challenges, it's going to be here for a lot longer. I'm Jim Kenzie.
As I mentioned earlier, the Honda Insight is now a member of our long-term fleet, and joining it in the near future will be the Chevy Trailblazer and the Suzuki XL7. And over the next few weeks, Graham and I will be giving you a little insight into the joys and maybe some of the disappointments of everyday driving with these vehicles. So make sure you join us for that as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
It's difficult to tell a company who is dealing with such concerns as extinction, to hear some guy in San Diego saying, bring back the Z.
TSN's Motoring 2001 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas, keep a good thing going. Go Midas.